Thank you, Anandita. Let me echo also a very warm welcome to all of you to ICRIER, to this book launch. Mr. Aurodeep Nandi, Acting Head, Economic and Trade Policy and Senior Economic Advisor, the British High Commission. Mr. Rajiv Ranjan Singh, Senior Consultant at ICRIER. I won't go through the whole form, I guess you know that, Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, ICRIER, and has been with the Central Board of Direct Taxes, Ministry of Finance. Distinguished speakers and panelists who you will hear as the day wears on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to this book release, Challenges of Indian Tax Administration, that has been edited by Mr. Rajiv Ranjan Singh and published by LexisNexis. At the outset, let me say that I'm extremely grateful to LexisNexis for publishing this book, as well as to Mr. Aurodeep Nandi and his team, as well as to the Prosperity Fund UK for funding this study. Let me say a little bit about the study itself and about the challenges that we are facing in tax administration. You know that on the 16th and the 17th of June, just the week gone by, we've had a big confabulation amongst officials of the Ministry of Finance, as well as the Minister of Finance, to deal with kind of reforming the tax system and tax administration. And underlying all of that is a lot of evidence basis that you will see that has come out in this book. And I hope, and we all hope at ICRIER, that some of that would be implemented over time in the budgets and also outside the budgets in tax reform and administration. So I would really encourage you, all of you, to read this book because there's a lot of effort that has gone into it, and there's a lot of evidence, and there is a lot of painstaking work that Mr. Rajiv Ranjan Singh and the team of experts, as I said, you will hear some of them during the course of the day, have put into this book. You know that countries across the world are dealing with the challenge of tax regulations and rising complexity. Tax revenues are declining as it is, well, not revenues are increasing, but you know, the ratios, and I will talk a little bit about them at the end of my opening remarks. And so economies are looking for further tax moderation to jumpstart growth. Now, this association between kind of expansionary fiscal policies and growth, or if you will, austerity and growth, was the subject of a lot of research during 2010 and 11, especially the IMF, and there were kind of opinions on both sides of the debate whether austerity was in fact expansionary. And I think the data fell heavily on the side of the fact that you need to have some form of expansion to kickstart the economy. And we saw that in India as well. There was kind of a lot of reductions in taxes at the time to jumpstart the economy. So that's an interesting debate, and a lot of that debate you will see, at least threads of that debate, in this book. Global forums such as OECD and the G20 platform for government policymakers, tax administrators, and academia to brainstorm and recommend collective measures on issues such as tax havens, tax evasion, and transfer pricing. So you, as I said, you will also see all of that in that book. The relevance of tax policy and tax administration has only increased in the last few years. You know, you're all kind of experts in this field, in your own fields, and you know that a spate of policy changes and retrospective amendments left Indian business worried and often vulnerable. The government has introduced measures to arrest the situation and restore the perception that India is indeed a tax-friendly country. And if you recall that kind of Sangam on the 16th and 17th, I think this was the key message that was sent out to the administration, that India needs to become, at least the perception needs to be, of a tax-friendly country. That doesn't mean you don't collect taxes, but you need to also be friendly to the people who are paying taxes. So the positive developments that have happened in the area of transfer pricing through operationalization of safe harbor rules and advanced pricing agreements. The new government is committed to eliminate the perception of tax terrorism. I mean, you read a lot about tax terrorism in the media, and I think it's not helpful especially if you're trying to attract FDI. It's not helpful that media labels India as such. Over the last couple of years, tax issues related to administration, compliance, international tax management have been studied at ICRIER. I will encourage you to go to our website and see the enormous amount of work that ICRIER has done in the area of tax administration and tax reforms in general, and of course led by Mr. R.R. Singh. Some of the published research includes Indian Tax Administration, a dialogue based on extensive discussions with all stakeholders in India and lessons from tax administration in UK, Brazil, and Australia. And Tax Shastra, which is a comparative account of tax administration in 3 countries, India, UK, and Brazil. Another publication, titled India's Investment Climate, addressing concerns about tax policy, focuses on international tax issues facing businesses. ICRIER also submitted a paper to the Prosperity Fund UK on cross-country comparison of GAR and a report to the Ministry of Finance on barriers to compliance and cost of compliance of paying direct taxes in India. And this is only the second study of its kind that has been done in India to estimate the cost of compliance of both direct taxes into individuals as well as corporates through a very, very large sample. It includes 6,000 individuals plus, and I think over 500 corporates. And it has been submitted to the Ministry of Finance. And the idea, the objective, of course, is how does one address the kind of costs of compliance that taxpayers face in India, thereby making India a non-adversarial and a tax-friendly regime. Mr. Rajiv Ranjan Singh, who is the editor of the book Challenges of Tax Administration, has also recently completed an ICRIER working paper on improving taxation environment to attract foreign direct investment. So today, in the long list of the research on tax that we have done, today we are very proud to present to you Challenges of Tax Administration, following extensive research on Indian tax administration. And as I said in my opening, we are deeply grateful and indebted to Prosperity Fund UK for funding the study. This book brings together and communicates perspectives of authors from varied backgrounds, and some of the names that you see here, current and erstwhile tax officials, so who worked with the system and are kind of well immersed in the system, professionals from the private sector, as well as academia. It covers a range of topics under the umbrella of tax administration, from taxpayer information services, widening of the tax base, tax data analysis to dispute resolution, among others. The authors have collected evidence from successful tax administration in these areas and mapped best practices. There's no point doing evidence-based research for policy when you don't benchmark yourself against what is the best existing in the world. And that's exactly what this book proposes to do. Because one of the first questions that policymakers will ask you when you present the evidence, so how does it compare either with yourself in the past or with other countries? So you have to do both a horizontal and vertical benchmarking, and this book does benchmarking with respect to other countries. And after that, there are recommendations from an Indian perspective, keeping in view our ambition to craft as I've been saying, a predictable, stable, and a non-adversarial tax regime. Mr. Rajiv Ranjan Singh of ICRIER has brought his vast experience. He worked in the tax administration for over 3 decades. So he's brought to bear his vast experience on the quality of this very readable collection. A little bit about, ICRIER, and then I will ask Mr. Nandi to make his opening remarks. So we do a lot of as you know, policy making and evidence-based research. And of late, tax administration and tax reforms have come to the forefront. We have 8 thematic areas under which we do research. And macroeconomic management, financial liberalization, and regulation is the broad theme under which we've conducted our tax work. We hope that, as a part of this exercise, of bringing out the book and disseminating it, public administrators, researchers, and students of tax administration will look at this book and take this work forward in the manner that they can, both at the level of academic research, which extends the research, as well as, of course, from the what to do, which this book talks about, to the how, to implementation. And it's extremely important, I think, and as I said, ICRIER has been working in these areas, to kind of look at this as an input. Reforming the tax administration cannot be an end in itself, obviously. I mean, it's a means to an end. And therefore, the other work that we are doing in health, in education, in environment, in climate change, in trade, etc., is related, if only peripherally, to what we are proposing here. And as I said, in the Sangam that was organized by the government of India, you had the theme of how do you increase tax to GDP ratios. And India's tax to GDP ratio compares very unfavorably with the tax to GDP ratios of any comparator country. I mean, at 10, 11, or 13%, I think the highest our tax to GDP ratio has been 13%, and I'm talking about the center. And it compares unfavorably with, and that was in 2011-12, I think, and it doesn't compare favorably with any other country, or countries that we would like to compare ourselves with. Korea at 27%, China at 20%, are much higher than India's tax to GDP ratio. So it's extremely important to widen and deepen the tax base, and also the number of taxpayers in India at 4%. That's the number that has recently come out. 4% of our population is very, very inadequate. And it doesn't help the cause because, as I said, this is a means to be able to spend on sectors that you would like to spend on, i.e. health and education and infrastructure. And unless you have the fiscal space to be able to do that, then interest rates are always going to be, because government will borrow and interest rates will tend to harden, which is not very helpful for investment of businesses in general. So I think all this is related to the other work that we're doing, and extremely important, I think, to begin thinking of this now, because we've talked about tax administration reforms for a number of years, and I think it's time, when we are on the cusp of 8% to 10% growth, it's extremely important that we also have a very modern tax system and a hardy tax system that is able to take us out of, in case we have experience temporary dips, then expansionary fiscal policy can help us take us out. And for that, all of that, we need fiscal space. So I think, for ICRIER, this is very important, and we'll continue to work on issues relating to tax. And this comes at an opportune time when India is attempting to kind of grow fast. And growth is important for India because, as you know, growth in 2008 or 5 to 2010, those years when we grew at about 8.5%, 9%, that was the time when the maximum impact on poverty was made. 140 million people were brought out of poverty. And, it was attributed to the fast growth that we had. But of course, we cannot stop there. We need these other social programs like Jan Dhan, direct benefit transfers, which give government more fiscal space because you're utilizing the funds, limited funds that government has, more efficiently and better. So PMJDY, the Jan Dhan program, the direct benefit transfers, I think they're all a part of the same grand design that we need to follow if we are to lift India from the 8% to 10% growth, which is absolutely necessary, not only for poverty, but also to be able to address the aspirations of the middle class Indians. And India should be able to aspire to that level, given that we have now been a lower middle income country for a few years. So without taking any much more of your time and saying that how proud and privileged we are at ICRIER for having released this book, as I said, it kind of complements a lot of the existing work that we've done, and we are very happy that Prosperity Fund has funded this book, and extremely delighted that it has been ably led by Mr. Rajiv Ranjan Singh and a team of experts, as I said, from government, from former government, from academia, who've kind of put a lot of effort into publication of the book. Let me also thank all of you for coming to this book launch. And the last thing I would say, that we're also saddened that Mr. Yashwant Sinha, who was supposed to be our chief guest today, is unable to make it. He would have liked to come, but unfortunately he's indisposed and doctor has advised him rest. So we wish him speedy recovery, and I hope that he's able to contribute to ICRIER's programs. He has been contributing to our programs in the past, and I hope that he's able to contribute to our programs in the future as well. So once again, thank you all for coming, and may I now request Mr. Nandi for his opening remarks. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kathuria. Let me start off with an analogy. When I was in school, I was 7th or 8th standard as class monitor. And it's a big class, so it's divided in two. I was monitor for one half of the class, and it's another person is monitor the other class. And I took my job as a class monitor very seriously. I would go by the rules. I would catch people who would be speaking, who would be saying things out of turn. A part of my job would be to check if people have done their homework. So even if people had forgotten, couldn't understand what they were doing, I would penalize them if it wasn't done properly. And we had a system of diaries. You could submit the diary to the teacher would write a remark on it. Next day I would come to check if the parent has actually signed it. I used to take it very seriously. As you can understand, I wasn't really a big hit with students in my school. I was rather on the hit list of a lot of people in my school. Now, the other half of the class was managed by this person called Mihir. And Mihir was an extremely cool person. He was friends with everyone. He talked to people. People knew him. If people were slipping at some places, he would kind of say, "Please, okay, fine, just do it. We'll take care of this." And people would do stuff for him, you know. They would be quite interested in helping Mihir out. And so one day the class teacher called both of us and said, I really don't understand what's going on, because from one half of the class, every day I'm signing this stack of diaries. And on the other side of the class, there's just nothing coming in. I'm just prosecuting no one. What's going on? And she did a spot check, and it turned out that the compliance level on both sides of the class was almost the same. And the question I ask you is, who do you think was a more successful monitor? And if you still think it's me, then probably you're a taxman. I've been working for a while with the British High Commission, and it's kind of enabled me to see a lot of systems that are there in the UK, not just with respect to tax, but also on a variety of other regulators. And HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which is broadly the equivalent of the tax department here, a few years back came up with a very novel concept. They said, let's call taxpayers customers. Now, a lot of old-timers in HMRC found this terrible. So how can we call taxpayers, people we are supposed to regulate, as customers? This is not how it's supposed to be. But then HMRC sort of made this a rule. You have to do that. And the logic behind this was that if you go to a shop and you want to buy something, you're paying money and you're getting a service. Similarly, you're paying some money to the government. Why should you not get good service on it? And as a result of this, tax officers started being rated not just on the revenue they could bring back, but also on their customer satisfaction. And you'll see this in a lot of regulatory environments in the UK. For instance, if you go to London for visiting and you clear security check, there's a small tablet at the side where you can give in your customer feedback. And they'll ask you, are you happy with it, sad with it? Do you like the fact that you got strip searched or whatever? So the point is that there is this focus on customer focus, which is ingrained in not just in terms of the vision statement, but also in the incentive structures which are there for tax officers. And then HMRC came up with a system of small business strategy, medium business strategy, and large business strategy. So then the tax department starts asking itself, how can I best cut out my services for a small business? When that small business develops into a medium-sized business, what are the different other suite of activities I can offer that business to grow up? And for large businesses, should I have more customized tax services such that I get better compliance from them? And I think it's this culture of customer focus that has increased ease of doing business in the UK. And HMRC went a step further. They said, now, the project which they're working on now is that in your tax software, which private softwares which people use, can we have a small button there where at the end of every quarter, you can just click that button and all your sales figures will just go off to the tax department. And it helps in two ways. One, HMRC will in advance tell you that this is the amount of tax which you should be expecting. But they're also calculating a lot of valuable information from taxpayers as a result of this. They know, for instance, if automobile producers are, what's the kind of sales that they're facing. So you have a kind of industry focus. So much so that a lot of other departments are now going to HMRC saying, please share this data with us because we want to target, say, just the farmers or just the auto producers. And you have this system which you're developing on this. So I think in many ways at the heart of all of this is that better regulation is a dialogue between three people. It's a dialogue between the government, between the person you're regulating, and the consumers. And if these three people talk to each other, then you're pretty much done. They'll do your work for you. And if you have that kind of system, then this works fantastic. Mr. Kathuria mentioned how tax terrorism is a part of the ongoing discussion on FDI and on encouraging investment and expanding tax base. And I completely agree. I think one of the fallacies in India's investment promotion things is that there is one nodal department that is in charge of make in so-and-so state or please invest in so-and-so state. And once that red carpet is rolled out, the other departments don't really care. So you could be welcomed into a state and then you're wondering what the VAT commissioner had for breakfast and if that's going to screw up your life or not. And I think it's till you have a situation where investment promotion is the joint responsibility of all departments, be it tax, be it labor, be it the chief minister's office, until you have all of these talking to each other, you really won't be able to get the kind of investment which India really deserves. Now, I'd like to end off by saying that we are obviously very proud to be associated with ICRIER. I know that I've had very, very long conversations with Mr. Singh on tax. It's impossible to have a short conversation with Mr. Singh on tax. And we are delighted to be a part of this. It's great that, that this book takes some of the best practices abroad and puts it together. From our end, I lead on ease of doing business in India and sharing best practices between UK and India on ease of doing business. As a part of that, we are in fact taking a set of HMRC heads of departments on these areas of customer satisfaction, customer journeys, tax administration to different states and to central government to share best practices. So this is all part of that wider effort. Thank you very much. I really look forward to the rest of this conference. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Ardeep. So you notice that there's been a change in the order since the chief guest is not available. So I thought that not only Mr. R.R. Singh could give introductory remarks, but he could also talk a little bit about the book before we released the book. And before I met Mr. Singh, like Ardeep, I used to think that tax is such a dry subject. But the passion with which he speaks about tax changes that perception in you about tax being a dry subject. So whenever I talk to him now, I don't feel tax as a dry subject. It's kind of energetic, and he's bubbling with enthusiasm, and it kind of spills over. Let me invite Mr. R.R. Singh for both his kind of introductory remarks, but as well to talk a little bit about what's in the book before we release it. Thank you.
Good morning. Challenges of Indian Tax Administration is the second book on tax administration that has been brought out by ICRIER. The book is the result of a project on Indian tax administration reforms funded by Prosperity Fund of UK. The project kickoff was a study trip of Commissioners of Income Tax and Customs and Excise to HMRCU. It was a really experience for our people to see the working of HMRC, how they didn't find anybody in the tax office. We met chartered accountants and others. They said that they hardly go to tax office. Either they get a telephone call or a small letter and the matter ends. So that was one aspect of it. The other aspect also we found very useful. Based on that, we started the project, and the contents of the book, which have been written by professionals with experience in both public sector and private sector, as well as the researcher of the ICRIER. It addresses some of the most critical and imminent challenges facing the Indian tax administration, which deserve immediate attention. The basic approach of the tax administration these days is to, in most of the countries, is to reduce tax gap through bringing about change in their approach from command and control model to voluntary compliance model. Voluntary compliance by taxpayers depend on making available information on certainty about the kind of and amount of tax to be paid, as well as the convenience to pay it with minimal compliance cost. Those who do not comply are subjected to action for widening of taxpayer base and deepening of taxpayer base through methods of and process of risk assessment and transfer pricing. For many defaulting cases, this may naturally involve dispute resolution as well. To tackle the cases of compulsive non-compliance defaulters, the tax administration takes action to recover outstanding taxes. But most importantly, there is need for tax data analysis and research for evidence-based formulation of tax policies, laws, regulations, and actions by the tax administration for effective decision making and implementation. The result of this work is on the above lines, and the 8 chapters which we have covered in this addresses the areas which I have just now mentioned. The common thread that binds all the chapters together is a greater focus on taxpayer and the provision of non-intrusive, non-adversarial system. It is an insightful look into the prevailing situation in the Indian tax system. The work reviews the problems affecting the system into their minutest detail, which are often overlooked in more complex studies, and tries to identify the cause behind implementation difficulties and suggests best practices from successful tax administration around the globe. It also reflects tax practitioners and tax officers' experience at the ground level, as well as primary research by way of interactive officers, dialogue with officers, private sector tax advisors, and practitioners. Stakeholder consultations were organized to understand the current situation, and meetings with ICT experts were also held to help formulate non-intrusive technological solutions. The edited volume contains cross-country commitment to showcase the best practices of the successful tax administrations. Implementable reforms have been suggested as outcome of the 2-year research effort. The recommendations are such which can be put into practice from the grassroots level upward, rather than being simply policy prescriptions which flows from the top down. This work may encourage further research and analysis on the subjects covered in this book. We also expect discussions and demands for better service as well from the taxpayers and other stakeholders. We expect the readers of this book to be participants of the tax administration system, such as tax officers, current and potential taxpayers, tax advisors, practitioners, economists, and academics. See, I can say that there are a lot of developments taking place every day. In fact, we can't keep abreast of the developments which is taking place today. And even today, what we have written, we find that government has been doing something on those lines. And there has been, if we look at the various articles coming in newspaper itself, there is a lot of interest in the general public also to react to these changes. So I hope this book will also elicit similar response, and probably we may take it forward. We have definitely tried to suggest and bring forward the best practices in various countries, which may be implementable in this by our administration. Thank you.
So we now release the book. May I request Anindita to make the announcement?
Thank you, Dr. Kathuria, Mr. Singh, and Mr. Nandi. Could I now request the dignitaries on the dais to release the book Challenges of Indian Tax Administration? And could I also request Stuti Manchanda to come and join us on the dais? We will break for tea in a couple of minutes, for about 15 minutes, and reconvene at 12:15 for the first session on taxpayer information services and widening of taxpayer base. Thank you. The arrangements for tea have been made in the hall right across, Jacaranda. So could I request you to proceed there? Thank you.